The Orioles have made their first pitching edition of the offseason, and it is a star from over in NPB. Now, it's not Roki Sasaki quite yet, but Tomoyuki Sugano could be a huge addition to this Orioles rotation. We'll dive deeper in what kind of pitcher he is at this point in his career. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, December 19th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. We've got a guest with us today, which we will get to in just a moment. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you as we talk about the college football playoffs. The college football playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The college football playoff presented by Allstate begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. And we are joined today by Yuri Karasawa. He covers NPB. You may know him across the baseball internet, more notably as Yakyu Cosmopolitan on Twitter, on YouTube. Actually, good timing here. Just the day we are recording this, Yuri, I know you put out kind of a video surrounding the NPB players that have already been signing with MLB teams or are reported to be heading that way, and that included Tomoyuki Sugano, who we are here to talk about. But first of all, Yuri, thank you so much for making the time difference work and hopping on the show today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about Sugano. He's a guy that, everyone thought would be going over to the States about 4 years ago, but that didn't end up happening. And I kind of thought that would be the end of Sugano's potential MLB chapter, but that wasn't the case. So yeah, I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of first know what kind of got you into covering NPB. I think for Orioles fans, there's pretty much 2 forays into NPB before Sugano. One was Koji Uehara coming over to the Orioles. He's been the by far biggest success story coming straight from Japan to Baltimore. The O's eventually traded him a couple of years later, which netted them Tommy Hunter and Chris Davis and turned into a good era of Orioles baseball. And Koji was amazing in Baltimore as well. And then going the other way, which was Orioles fans watching Adam Jones go and play in Japan for the final couple of years of his career. That's kind of really the only connections. The Orioles have not had a lot of Japanese-born players in the past. So I wanted to kind of first ask, what got you into covering the league, covering the sport, and where you got to now, which you have certainly a following as you kind of break down that league over in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm a Japanese American. I've always liked both Major League Baseball and Nippon Professional Baseball. And during the pandemic, I saw Foolish Bailey kind of put out a tweet that was like, covering MLB is a little bit oversaturated. But if you really want to kind of get your foot in the door, maybe try covering the KBO or MPB in English. And I thought that, I could kind of position myself as a bridge for people to be able to cover Japanese baseball in English, because that's what I love doing. I love telling the stories about Japanese baseball to a more Western audience to be able to spread the word. And also on the Japanese side of things, I like trying to introduce analytics and more kind of MLB type thinking into the MPB space as well. So I try to be that bridge and I try to do my best.
Yeah, you've done a fantastic job. I've learned a lot just in the last couple of days, pretty much watching anything you've done that's mentioned Sugano over the past year or so, your recap of your top 50. And it was kind of interesting hearing, how you didn't put Sugano in your top 50 NPB players at the beginning of the season because he was coming off some injury and some questions and some age, and he kind of proved a lot of doubters wrong. That's kind of where I want to start here. He's 35 years old. This is not a young, spry ace version of Sugano that the Orioles are getting at this point, but he's also coming off his 3rd MVP. So you look at him right now, and I guess the first question is what is his legacy as he leaves NPB? And there's no guaranteeing that his MVP career is over. He could certainly go back to Japan and continue to pitch. We've seen many players do it, come over to the States for a while, go back kind of right at the end of their careers. But at this point, if that is it, if this is really successful in the U.S. and he's got 4 or 5 plus more seasons pitching over here, what is that legacy for Sugano in NPB?
Yeah, well, we can start at the beginning. This guy was a top prospect at Tokai University in the early 2010s. And in the 2011 MPB draft, everyone's expecting him to go to the Yomiuri Giants. That's his childhood team. And his uncle was the manager of the team, Tatsunori Hara. So everyone's thinking, like, of course he's going to the Giants, right? But then it's the Nippon Ham Fighters who end up drafting him. And he doesn't want to sign there. So he actually ends up not signing, sits out a year, goes back to play college ball on like a post-graduation system kind of thing. And then the following year, he ends up joining the Giants anyway. And then, he finishes second in the Rookie of the Year in 2013. 2014, he wins his first CL MVP and ERA title. 2017, 2018, he wins back-to-back Sawamura Awards, also obviously pitches in the World Baseball Classic for Samurai Japan against U.S. famously in that semifinal. Then 2018, he also throws a no-hitter in the postseason. Fast forward to 2020, he wins his second CL MVP award, and that's when he gets posted to MLB the first time, of course. But after he ends up not getting an MLB deal, or at least not an offer that he was looking for, he re-signs with the Yomiuri Giants for 4 years. And at that point, you're thinking, yeah, another chance. He might get one, but he'd be 35. Like, there's probably no way, right? And he starts to, have father time catch up to him a little bit. He doesn't have the best seasons between 2021 and 2023. But then 2024, I always say he found the fountain of youth, and just seemingly out of nowhere, this guy rediscovered himself, and he is back to that, superstar form that we saw in the late 2010s. Now, it's a slightly different style. He's not quite as overpowering, but yeah, I mean, the numbers he put up this year were fantastic. And I would say he's probably a top 10 to 15 pitcher in MPB history. He's absolutely on that kind of Hall of Fame trajectory. I would describe him as kind of a Japanese version of just like a Clayton Kershaw. He's just been there, done that. He's, gotten all the awards, all the titles. And he had a ridiculous 7-year peak there between 2014 and 2020-ish. So yeah, Sugano, one of the best pitchers in MPB history.
And I think for Orioles fans and Baltimore media covering this team, it's not something the team's been used to. Because again, as I mentioned, like Uehara came over almost 15 years ago at this point. The only player they've really had come and make an impact from an Asian country since then was Hyun-Soo Kim, who came over from the KBO and was here for a season and a half. And really there wasn't the big media followings. I don't think anybody expects Sugano to have an Ohtani type of following getting here, but what do you see that case being in Baltimore? Because there is not a large Japanese population in Baltimore. That is one thing about the city, and it's kind of been brought up in the Sasaki talks. For Sugano, it's obviously a very different decision process when he was deciding where he was going to sign in MLB this year. But what do you see being the following, the extra coverage around Sugano? Because he's not the 25-year-old superstar coming to MLB. He is the, as you said, kind of living legend in that league, trying to challenge himself now in another country, in another league, to potentially finish off his career.
Yeah, I definitely think the Koji Uehara connection is going to be talked about a lot, because it's honestly a really interesting parallel to make. They're both kind of Yomiuri Giants legends, and they're both coming to MLB towards the end of their career in their mid-30s. And Uehara obviously ends up making his mark mostly with the Boston Red Sox. And, a lot of Japanese people, when they think about AL East teams, it's going to be the Yankees and the Red Sox. But I think the Orioles have been, on the periphery of people's radars in recent years, thanks to Shintaro Fujinami. And of course, the Orioles, with Fujinami, Uehara, and now Sugano, that's only 3 Japanese players in their franchise history. Whereas, teams like the Red Sox, the Yankees, you go out west with like the Mariners and the Dodgers, much deeper history there with Japanese players. But I think people recognize that the Orioles are a really good team. And I think a lot of Yomiuri Giants fans, thanks to the Uehara connection already being there, are going to be able to cheer for Sugano and Baltimore in 2025 and hopefully beyond.
Yeah, the Fuji time probably wasn't what he wanted exactly, but the fans certainly loved him, and hoping for the combination of the fan support and a little more success for Sugano in Baltimore. So next up with Yuri, we are kind of dive a little deeper into Sugano. We've learned about the legacy, but he's 35 now. Listen, he's coming off an MVP, but he is 35 years old, and his stuff's a little different. His velocity's a little different. He's not the same pitcher that you might have watched in the 2017 WBC highlights. So coming up next, we will kind of break down who is Sugano now as he comes over to MLB. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So we are here. Our guest is Yuri Karasawa. He covers NPB at Yakyu Cosmopolitan, got a YouTube channel. He's out on social media as well covering that league. And we are talking about the newest Oriole. That is Tomoyuki Sugano, who the Orioles signed to a 1-year, $13 million contract earlier this week. And let's kind of talk about where he could fit in a big league rotation and kind of what he looks like right now. My initial thoughts when I recorded right after the signing was made on Monday evening was, at this point in his career with the stuff, not exactly the same, at least with the fastball, I kind of penciled him in as a number 4-ish starter for the Orioles. And that's different for the O's than it is for another team. The Orioles don't really have a true ace right now. They probably need still one more starting pitcher to sign before this season begins, something we've covered a lot on this show. But just in terms of who Sugano is now, I guess let's kind of start with, how has he changed as the years have gone on, as the stuff has changed, as the fastball velocity has gone down? And I know he did deal with a little bit of an injury bug in 2023 as well. So kind of how has that approach and that stuff changed for him?
Yeah, well, I think the important thing to know with Sugano is, like, yeah, he knows how to pitch, and he's going to find a way to get the job done. And so with the diminishing stuff, the diminishing whiff rates, many, older pitchers might struggle, but in this case with Sugano in 2024, he adapted. So he just started using his fastball less. He introduced the cutter as more of his big other fastball to use. And he also has the sinker. And so really just trying to increase his ability to generate soft contact, get ground balls. Maybe in his prime 5 years ago, you would have seen him as very much a four-seam slider pitcher, whereas now he really does mix speeds a lot. This season, he used the fastball 26% of the time, the cutter 21%, the slider the same amount, and then also increasing that splitter usage up to 16%, whereas a couple years ago, it was more in that like 10 to 13% range. So he has a 6-pitch mix, and with a lot of MLB pitchers, you might have 6 pitches, but only use like 4 in a game per se. But for Sugano, it's like he's really using, his entire repertoire really well. And so, this is a guy who is not really maxing out at much more than 94, 95 miles per hour at this point in his career, but he can paint the corners. And if you look at Lance Brzdowski's breakdown on him, he talks about how he had a 70% plus zone rate on his fastball this year. So he really pounded that thing for strikes, particularly low and away. That's really where he likes to live with almost all of his pitches, but especially the fastball. It's worth noting in MPB this year, dead balls, a lot of slugging was down. So I think he understood like he can afford to miss down the middle sometimes and still not have to pay for it. That's not going to be the case in MLB. Obviously, a lot of damage can be done in that area. So he's going to have to make adjustments, be able to live with a few more walks, because this season he was just not walking anybody. He only walked 16 batters all season, a walk rate below 3%, which was best in MPB. So it's a guy with tremendous command as opposed to just overpowering stuff, but a really deep and effective arsenal.
Yeah, we showed the stuff on the screen there from NPB Pitch Profiler, which has been a great way to look at basically the version of Baseball Savant from NPB, which is great to learn about a lot of these players over there. And I think, you talked about it some he uses the four-seamer more than any other pitch. That's pretty standard wherever you look in the world. You're gonna find a starting pitcher who's using a four-seamer more than any other pitch. But there have been concerns about not just the velo being down, because I know he was, when we saw him in the WBC, when he was back in that run where he won the back-to-back Sawamura Awards, he was more of a mid-90s guy. He's now more so low to mid-90s, emphasis on the probably low 90s when he is out there. Now it's pinpoint command, so if you can throw it wherever you want, velocity doesn't matter nearly as much. But I saw you had kind of posted the looks at the fastballs on Lance's thread, where exactly where he's throwing all those fastballs, and it's as you mentioned, a lot of down and away to right-handers, just trying to paint that corner. And a lot of Major League Baseball is trying to get the ride on that four-seamer and throw it up in the zone. So I was wondering if you think he would have to either change where he throws his four-seamer or reduce the usage of that pitch to continue to have success, because it's a different type of hitter also that you're going to face day in and day out in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the big philosophical differences in pitching between MLB and MPB is a lot of MPB pitchers still like to live down. It's keeping the fastball down. Shota Imanaga made this adjustment this past season, where in MPB was a lot of down low in the zone. And then he goes to the Chicago Cubs and you see him climbing the ladder a lot more. Yoshinobu Yamamoto had a little more trouble with this adjustment. In fact, he was kind of, getting his fastball way too much over the heart of the plate, trying to get it up. And towards the end of the season, I think he was able to get it up a little bit more. But obviously, certain teams like the Dodgers are actually okay with low fastballs more than others. With Baltimore, it's going to be interesting to see, because I do think Sugano, you may very well see his strikeout rate be higher in MLB than it was in MPB. That is typically what happens with Japanese pitchers because of just the difference in styles with the hitting. There's more slugging in MLB, obviously, but so many slap hitters in MPB makes it harder to get strikeouts. You saw that with Masahiro Tanaka actually coming back to MPB, where his strikeout rate was quite a bit lower than it was in his latter years with the New York Yankees. So I think Sugano, his fastball, even if it's below average by MLB standards in terms of the velo only being in the low 90s, nothing particularly standing out with the shape, I think he can keep it probably around that 20 to 25% range. And you're going to see a lot of those sliders / sweepers and the split finger. I think being able to pair the fastball and splitter in MLB is so huge right now. You're seeing the Japanese pitchers like Imanaga and Yamamoto, Sasaki, of course. They're really trying to, they're introducing this wave of like splitter pitchers. And so I think you're going to be able to see a lot of that with Baltimore, and with a good enough infield defense behind him, hopefully having success pitching to contact.
Yeah, and I know he was a guy who was kind of known for his slider, especially earlier in his career, and that was his pitch. But we've seen multiple pitchers over the last few seasons come over from Japan with an absolutely dominant splitter, forkball, whatever Kodai Senga throws out there. Who knows exactly what that pitch is, but it is awfully hard to hit. And the hope is that Sugano's got something looking like that. But I wanted to ask about kind of the off speeds in general, because even if the fastball remains at the 20-25%, whatever it may be, it feels like the off speeds are going to maybe determine how high of a ceiling Sugano can have with the Orioles, not just this year, but if it goes well and he remains in the major leagues for years to come as he gets into his late 30s. And if he does lose even more velocity, I mean, if he's pitching until he's 40, he might not even be at 92 at that point. So it's going to be on these off speeds. I know there was more cutter this year, and I know that's a pitch that can generally neutralize lefties. I know it's a big curveball, and I've seen some writing about how he is kind of so in tune with his pitch mix and his command that he can almost, and I'm not putting him to the Yu Darvish level, but he can almost do the Yu Darvish of where it's like, yes, I have 6 pitches, but if I take a little off here and a little off there and a little bit here, it's almost like I have 9 or 10 pitches. Like, how much of that do you think can help him? Because at the end of the day, when you're 35 and you're throwing 92, wherever you are in the world, whatever league you're coming from, you're going to be relying generally on A, command, which we know he has set up, and B, good off speeds to get major league hitters out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is just so crafty, like you put it there with Darvish. A lot of Japanese pitchers, well, they are, where you'll see like variations of a splitter and changeup. And yeah, with Sugano, you take a look at his splitter or forkball. At this point in his career, is it as good as the Kodai Senga Ghost Fork or Yoshinobu Yamamoto splitter? It's not. I mean, with those guys in MPB, you saw the splitter whiff rate be over 50%. With Sugano this season, it was at 37%-ish. So that's still very good, but it's obviously not quite as dominant. But of course, I would say his command is right up there with a guy like Yamamoto. And his ability to not only generate swing and miss on his slider, but to throw it for strikes is second to none. And yeah, the cutter and sinker both for him this year were working as well, as strike getting pitches. Obviously, as he just walks so few batters, being able to throw everything for strikes is a true skill set, I think. And yeah, I mean, being able to adapt versus lefties and righties, he has quite neutral splits overall. Throwing that splitter a little bit more to lefties than righties, as well as the cutter. But yeah, I think you're going to see some adjustments here and there, and obviously he needs to be able to be figuring things out on the fly. But I don't think he's going to change all that much about who he is as a pitcher. And I think he's going over with a lot of confidence. He's saying that, I'm not going to be changing that much about my game. I'm going to show that what I have right now, it's good enough for the MLB level. I think he truly believes that. And, maybe he has to eat a little bit of humble pie early on, but I think he is just such an experienced, smart pitcher. He's going to be able to figure it out over time. This isn't a guy that you're going to see like Kohei Arihara a couple of years ago for the Texas Rangers just get rocked and he's out of the league within a month. Sugano is a guy you're going to be seeing in Baltimore's, starting pitcher mix for the whole season. That's what I believe.
So we're going to take one more break here. When we come back quickly with Yuri, we'll just talk about expanding on that a little bit, like what the expectations could be, how this goes really well, what situations there could be where maybe it doesn't. And I know you all want to know about Roki Sasaki. So we've got Yuri here. We'll maybe go with one Roki Sasaki question as well to finish it off when we get back. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by SelectQuote. The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. You can just head to SelectQuote.com and licensed insurance agents, they'll call you right away with the right policy for your life and for your budget. And you invest so much time in taking care of yourself. SelectQuote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. So get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Again, that is SelectQuote.com/lockedon to get started today. One more time, it's SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Yuri Karasawa is our guest today. We are talking about Tomoyuki Sugano, who the Orioles signed to a one-year deal. And Yuri, I just wanted to kind of finish it off with this. We've talked about everything that Sugano did in Japan, the pitch mix, everything he's coming to the U.S. with. Now, I am of the belief that there's no such thing as a bad one-year deal, that even though the Orioles truly believe in Sugano and what he can do, if this goes poorly, it's not something that's going to hurt the Orioles too much on a team with a much bigger budget now with a new owner, and it's a one-year $13 million deal. But we'll end on the good note. So we'll start with what do you think is the scenario where this goes poorly? Now, again, I agree with you. The command is just so good that there's a floor here that's much higher than a lot of other pitchers that may be coming from other leagues into Major League Baseball. But what do you think is the scenario where, maybe Sugano he loses a rotation spot halfway through the year. He becomes a long reliever. At some point, he doesn't finish the year with the team. He's not on the postseason roster. Things like that where I think the floor is high enough where it's not like he's DFA'd 2 months into the year. But what would bring a scenario where this doesn't fully work out, where the O's get a starter in their rotation all year?
Yeah, well, I think the worst case scenario for Sugano is basically, if he's coming into spring training, not feeling at 100%, he's had injury problems leading up to 2024. That's kind of what prevented him from reaching his true potential in 2021, 2022, 2023. The fastball velocity being down even more. Like if he's sitting 90, then the fastball is just not going to play at all. And that's going to put so much pressure on his off-speed pitches to be able to get the job done. And again, I think he lives so much in the zone that if he doesn't make these adjustments, he's going to give up a lot of home runs. Granted, 51% ground ball rate this season. That's very towards the top of the league in MPB. He is a ground ball pitcher. He's not one of these guys that's, going to give up homers on pitches that he's dotting. But if he misses over the plate, yeah, those are going to be taken out. I think, honestly, a pitcher of his caliber, the floor that he's shown, the longevity that he's shown throughout his MPB career, it would be very surprising to see him be just completely ineffective. But like you say, a more diminished role as the year goes on, that would be definitely the bad kind of outcome for Sugano.
So let's flip it to the other side. His command's elite. The splitter, slider are working great. He's doing enough with the cutter, sinker, four-seamer to have a good enough, major league average fastball. And he's staying in this rotation all year. How good do you think it can end? You don't have to give me like an ERA prediction or anything for him in year one in MLB after 12 years in Japan. You just don't know what it's going to look like. But how important or trustworthy can he become? I think if you're a team trying to make a deep playoff run, you probably want 4 starters in the postseason. Like, can this get to a point, you think, where Sugano's starting a postseason game for the Orioles? Can this be a guy who you are truly trusting out there and you feel really good about it every 5 days? Like, what does this look like if it all goes well in year one for Sugano?
Yeah, I think with Sugano, you could absolutely see him become a postseason starter for Baltimore. I don't think the ceiling is, quite as high as a lot of other Japanese guys coming over. Obviously, you're looking more in that like Hiroki Kuroda range from, a decade or so ago. And a couple of comps in terms of just like numbers or ratios I can think of in terms of not necessarily the stylistically, because I think he is quite different from almost every MLB pitcher. I mean, just in terms of both mechanically and his pitch mix is quite different. But guys like Merrill Kelly, Aaron Savale, Paul Blackburn, guys who are, maybe high 3s, low 4s in the ERA range, not getting all that much swing and miss, but very good control, keeping the walks low. With, again, I think he's going to have some starts where the long ball becomes an issue for him. But I think overall, you're going to see him be a back-end pitcher in the rotation. And if things go well, he starts to earn more trust in the middle of the rotation.
Yeah, the funny thing is, reminds me a little bit of Zach Eflin, who's in this Orioles rotation right now. I mean, Eflin with these minuscule walk rates, he's painting the corners. He's throwing 6 different pitches. It's not fastball velocity. It's not crazy swing and miss. It's just pinpoint command. And I think Orioles fans will have a good feeling knowing maybe they get Eflin and Sugano back-to-back in the rotation and 2 straight days. You're not giving out free passes. You might give up runs. You might give up homers, but nothing makes baseball fans pull their hair out more than walks. And Sugano definitely avoids those. I had 2 just kind of real quick questions, and you don't have to go super in-depth into the answers. One is about the 6-man rotation question you always get when a pitcher comes over from Japan, just having to pitch a little more frequently. I know Shota Imanaga did pretty well this year to just kind of fall right in. Yamamoto, we didn't get to see how well he would do it because he had the injury issues this year. And the other thing is just about longevity. Like, obviously Sugano signed to just a 1-year deal, but if he pitches well, like, how much longer do you think he can go? Because obviously if he pitches well, the Orioles are going to be interested in bringing him back for another year plus.
Yeah, definitely. The 6-man rotation thing, because of how MPB operates, is very important. MPB typically 6 games a week. Monday is always off. So every pitcher just has their day in the rotation. You're the Friday pitcher, you're the Monday pitcher. And so most guys are obviously only used to throwing once a week. But something that I think gets overlooked when a lot of, MLB writers talks about this is Japanese pitchers on any given night are throwing like 120 to 130 pitches. And Sugano was definitely a guy capable of doing that. This is a guy who has thrown 42 complete games in his MPB career, things that you don't see really in MLB anymore. So I think if you, kind of translate that into, you're pitching on 4 or 5 days rest, maybe you have to skip a start here and there, but you're not having those ridiculously high pitch counts, obviously. Then I think Sugano's actually going to be able to pitch just fine within a 5-man rotation. And yeah, I mean, again, he's a guy who has, for the most part, been durable throughout his career. He's had a couple of injuries as he gets older. And I think the interesting thing is, again, in 2024, before the season, I didn't even think to put him in my top 50 because, to be quite honest with you, a lot of the talk was like, oh, this guy's kind of washed. but then he proved everyone wrong. So I think he has probably 2 to 3 more good years left in the tank, and then he might return to MPB after that. But of course, a guy like him, he wants to be able to return to Japan with his head held high. He wants to be able to say, I had success in MLB. I gave it my all. The worst case scenario for a lot of guys like Naoyuki Uesawa, who the Rays signed this season, was struggling, getting DFA'd, grinding it out in AAA, and just kind of coming back to Japan saying, I didn't really achieve what I set out to do. So I think Sugano is not going to be like that. I think Sugano is going to, at least for 2025, he's going to pitch the full season and show everyone that he's, an MLB caliber arm, even at 35.
Yeah. We know this is not the number one ace coming over for this Orioles rotation. We know they're still looking for somebody to upgrade this rotation, but I do like this Sugano move for the O's. I do like what it does for the back end of the rotation. I do like the stability it brings. It's weird to say a guy who's never thrown a pitch in Major League Baseball brings stability, but it feels like if you're going to bring anyone over from NPB to bring stability to the back of your rotation, feels like from what you've said, what I've been reading, this is the guy to fit that mold. And that's definitely a great thing for the Orioles. Yuri, I've taken up plenty of your time already, but definitely among everybody watching and everybody in the room right now, nobody's seen Roki Sasaki more than you. He's dominating headlines right now, especially because besides our guy Corbin Burns, he's probably the number one free agent, or at least guy that could be signed by anybody. We know his free agency situation is a little odd where he is right now, but did you have a prediction on Sasaki? You can say Orioles and make every fan watching here love you forever, but I wonder if you had any prediction about, we know it, this will be after January 15th to maximize the money there with the international bonus pool, but did you have a prediction on how this kind of plays out at all?
Yeah, so my prediction with Roki has always been Padres rather than Dodgers. And I think as the offseason has gone on, though, I think we are realizing that it's not as black and white as people thought from the beginning, where they're thinking, of course, he's going to the Dodgers. He has the Shohei Ohtani, the Yoshinobu Yamamoto connection. Of course, he's going to the Padres. Yu Darvish is kind of his idol, his mentor. I really think this is a situation where Roki Sasaki is deciding what is my best environment in terms of team situation, in terms of pitching development. And so I wouldn't roll out a team like Baltimore. Now, is it a really low possibility? Sure. But, with a guy like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, probably a 0% chance given his price tag. With Roki Sasaki, if he likes the team environment, if he thinks he's going to have success, if they're going to be able to, help him get to the next level and achieve his goal, which is to become the number one pitcher in the world, then I think they're, on the table. So you got to think of teams like the Mariners, the Giants, the Cubs. Those teams are all on the table because Roki Sasaki is thinking about more than just geographic location or money, or, like what other Japanese players are on the team that, which is traditionally associated with guys going over. But like you see with Sugano, it's like that's not always the case. Like some guys have completely different priorities. So yeah, I mean, Roki Sasaki, I think the likelihood is that he'll end up on the West Coast, but likelihood doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen.
Yuri, that's all we needed. There's a chance. There's still a chance out there. Yuri, thank you so much for joining us. Let everybody know where they can find your work, whether it be via YouTube, social media, things you're doing, writing, whatever it may be. Let people know where they can find more Yuri and talking about baseball.
Yeah, so Yakyu Cosmopolitan or Yakyu Cosmo on basically all platforms, YouTube and X especially. I also write for the World Baseball Network. I do some stuff for Japan Ball. Please sign up for the Japan Ball newsletter if you're interested in weekly newsletters about MPB and just Japanese baseball in general. We do tours as well for anyone who wants to visit MPB stadiums and get to see former MLB players or future MLB players grinding it out in MPB. So yeah.
We thank Yuri Karasawa so much for joining us. We'll be back next week. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.